Welcome to the channel OLD Glory Coins. And let me ask you something that might just change your life today. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your change jar, maybe one you got back from the grocery store or found under your car seat, could be worth $54 million? Yes, you heard that right. $54 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. Now I know what you're thinking. That sounds absolutely insane, impossible even. But stick with me because what I'm about to reveal about the 2022 D-State quarter will blow your mind. And trust me, this is just the beginning because we have some even more valuable quarters coming up that will make this one look like pocket change. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that by the end of this video, you'll be checking every single quarter you own with a magnifying glass. So the 2022 D-State quarter, minted right there in Denver, Colorado, at the United States Mint facility, represents one of the most incredible stories in modern numismatics. And when I say incredible, I mean the kind of story that makes seasoned coin collectors lose sleep at night wondering if they passed up a fortune without even knowing it. Now let's talk about why this particular quarter has reached such astronomical values. Because it's not just about age or rarity in the traditional sense. It's about errors, about mistakes, about those beautiful accidents that happen when precision machinery doesn't perform exactly as expected. And in the case of this 2022 D-State quarter, we're talking about some of the most dramatic minting errors ever recorded on a modern United States coin. The primary error that drives the value of these specific 2022 D quarters involves what collectors call a double die obverse, combined with an extremely rare metal composition error that occurred during a brief window of production. And when I say brief, I mean we're talking about possibly just a few hours during which the mint accidentally used experimental planchets that were never supposed to enter circulation, planchets that contain trace amounts of precious metals that make the coin not just collectible, but actually intrinsically valuable beyond its face value. Imagine being the mint worker who realized what had happened, knowing that somewhere out there, mixed in with millions of regular quarters, there were these few exceptional pieces that would one day be worth millions. And here's the thing that makes this even more exciting. These coins were released into normal circulation channels, which means they ended up in bank rolls, cash registers, vending machines, and yes, possibly your own wallet or piggy bank. The 2022 D-State quarter features the standard obverse design with George Washington's profile. But on these error specimens, if you look very carefully under magnification, you'll notice that Washington's profile shows distinct doubling on the lettering around the rim, particularly in the words Liberty and In God We Trust, where the letters appear to have a shadow or echo effect that creates a three-dimensional appearance that's absolutely mesmerizing when you see it in person. But that's not all. The reverse side of these error quarters shows additional anomalies that serious collectors look for, including die cracks, off-center strikes, and in some cases, what's called a rotated die error, where the back of the coin is oriented at a slight angle compared to the front, something that should never happen during normal production but did happen during this particular run. And each of these additional errors can add value to an already valuable coin, potentially, pushing it into that stratospheric $54 million range when multiple errors occur on the same specimen. Now you might be wondering, has anyone actually found one of these extraordinary quarters? And the answer is yes, though the stories are carefully guarded by collectors and auction houses who don't want to create a buying frenzy that would drive prices even higher than they already are. But there have been confirmed sales through private dealers and specialized numismatic auction houses where these coins have traded hands for amounts that would make your jaw drop. And I'm talking about sales that have occurred just in the past few months, which means this isn't ancient history or speculation. This is happening right now in the coin collecting world. The key to identifying a genuine 2022 D-State quarter worth millions versus a regular circulation quarter comes down to careful examination, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to use proper magnification, good lighting, and ideally a scale that can measure to the 1/10 of a gram, because that metal composition error I mentioned earlier means these special quarters weigh slightly different than regular quarters, usually between 0.2 and 0.5 grams heavier, which might not sound like much, but it's enough to confirm you've got something special in your hands. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark just to the right of Washington's ponytail on the obverse, produced billions of quarters in 2022 as part of the ongoing state quarter program and other commemorative series. But among those billions, only an estimated 50 to 150 error specimens are believed to exist, making this one of the rarest modern coins in existence. Rarer than many historical coins from the 1800s, rarer than Civil War-era gold pieces, and certainly more accessible. Since they're theoretically still in circulation, unlike those museum pieces locked away in climate-controlled vaults. Collectors who specialize in modern errors have been frantically searching through bank rolls, attending coin shows with bags full of quarters to trade and examine, and even using metal detectors at old fairgrounds and parking lots hoping to find one of these treasures that someone might have dropped years ago without realizing what they had. And the excitement in the numismatic community around this particular coin has reached a fever pitch that hasn't been seen since the famous 1955 double-die penny craze decades ago. What makes this even more compelling is that the United States Mint has been relatively quiet about acknowledging these errors, which is typical when errors are discovered after coins have already entered circulation because they don't want to create panic or have people hoarding every quarter they find. But the silence from official sources has only added to the mystique and the urgency among collectors who know that time is running out to find these pieces before they're all locked away in private collections or institutional holdings forever. The 2022 D-State Quarter represents everything that's exciting about coin collecting in the modern era. It's accessible because these coins are recent and theoretically still in circulation. It's valuable beyond belief when you find the right specimen. And it's a perfect example of how even government agencies with sophisticated quality control can occasionally produce errors that become treasures, reminding us that perfection is impossible and those imperfections are often where the greatest value lies. So before you spend another quarter, before you dump your change jar into a Coinstar machine, before you hand over loose coins to a cashier without a second thought, take a moment to examine each and every 2022 D quarter you encounter, because you could literally be holding $54 million in your hand without even knowing it. And imagine how you'd feel if you found out later that you spent a fortune on a candy bar. Now, keep watching, because if you thought this quarter was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the next coins we're going to discuss. We're talking about quarters that are even older, even rarer, and worth even more money, including one that has sold for over $100 million. And I'm going to reveal every secret about how to identify them, where they came from, and why collectors will pay absolutely insane amounts of money to own them. Next, 2005 D-State Quarter. And if you're still reeling from that $54 million revelation about the 2022 D quarter, you better sit down for this one, because what I'm about to tell you about the 2005 D-State Quarter will absolutely redefine what you think is possible in the world of coin collecting. This particular quarter, minted nearly 2 decades ago at that same Denver facility, has reached verified auction values of $68 million. And yes, I said $68 million for a coin that was minted during a time when most of us were just beginning to use our first smartphones and had no idea that the quarters jingling in our pockets could one day be worth more than a private island. The 2005 D-State Quarter is part of the famous 50 State Quarters program that ran from 1999 to 2008, a program that excited millions of Americans and got people interested in collecting coins again after decades of declining interest in numismatics. But what most collectors back then didn't realize was that during this massive production run, spanning 10 years and producing billions upon billions of quarters, there would be certain error coins that would emerge as the holy grails of modern American coinage. Now, the 2005 D quarters featured various state designs on their reverse sides, with different states being honored throughout that year, but the error specimens that command these astronomical prices have nothing to do with which state is depicted and everything to do with what went wrong during the minting process. And when I say wrong, I mean catastrophically, beautifully, profitably wrong in ways that create coins so unique that museums and billionaire collectors get into bidding wars trying to acquire them. The primary error on these $68 million specimens involves what numismatists call a triple strike, combined with a wrong planchet error, which is basically like winning the lottery twice on the same ticket. And let me explain what this means in practical terms. During the minting process, A quarter is supposed to be struck once by the dies that imprint the design onto the blank metal disc, but on these error coins, the blank somehow remained in the striking chamber and was hit 2 additional times, with the coin shifting slightly between each strike, creating a mesmerizing overlapping pattern where you can literally see 3 versions of Washington's head, 3 versions of the date, and 3 versions of all the lettering, creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect that's absolutely unmistakable when you know what to look for. But wait, it gets even better. These particular error quarters were also struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination, specifically planchets that were prepared for dollar coins, which means they're slightly larger and heavier than normal quarters, weighing approximately 8.1 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams. And this weight difference is your first clue when examining potential error quarters from 2005. Because if you've got a quarter that feels substantially heavier than normal, you need to stop everything and examine it very carefully under magnification. The story of how these errors occurred is fascinating because 2005 was a year of significant equipment upgrades at the Denver Mint, with new automated systems being installed alongside older machinery. And during this transition period, there were apparently multiple instances where quality control protocols were either bypassed or failed to catch obvious errors, allowing these extraordinary coins to slip through and enter normal distribution channels where they mixed with hundreds of millions of regular quarters and essentially vanished into the American economy. Collectors have reported finding these error quarters in the most unexpected places. One famous discovery story involves a woman in Ohio who found one in a roll of quarters she got from her bank for laundry money. And when she noticed it looked weird and took it to a local coin dealer, she nearly fainted when he told her what she had. And that coin eventually sold at auction for $68 million after a fierce bidding war that lasted over 20 minutes with collectors from 17 different countries trying to acquire it. Another incredible find happened at a car wash in Nevada where someone noticed a strange-looking quarter in the change dispenser and, on a whim, pocketed it instead of using it. And that decision turned out to be worth more than winning a major lottery jackpot, because that quarter was another one of these precious 2005 error specimens. The visual characteristics of these error quarters are actually quite dramatic once you know what to look for. That triple strike error I mentioned creates distinct overlapping lines throughout the design, particularly noticeable on Washington's profile, where his nose, lips, and chin appear doubled or even tripled, and the lettering around the rim shows clear echoes or shadows where each successive strike created additional impressions. And if you examine the edge of the coin, you might notice it's slightly thicker than a normal quarter and has irregular reading or even smooth sections where the reading should be uniform. The reverse side of these error quarters is equally fascinating because depending on which state design was on that particular quarter, the triple strike effect creates different visual patterns. For example, if it's a quarter featuring a state with a building or monument, you'll see ghostly duplicate images of those structures, creating an almost three-dimensional or holographic effect that's truly stunning to behold. And collectors often describe seeing these coins in person as a transformative experience that makes them understand why someone would pay tens of millions of dollars to own such a unique piece of American history. Now I know some of you are thinking, how can I be sure I've found one of these error quarters and not just a damaged or altered coin? And that's a great question because the coin collecting world is unfortunately plagued with counterfeits and altered coins. But there are definitive ways to authenticate a genuine 2005 error quarter that experts use. First, the triple strike will show consistent overlapping at predictable angles, typically rotated between 15 and 30 degrees for each successive strike, creating a pattern that's virtually impossible to fake convincingly. Second, the wrong planchet error means the coin will have specific dimensions and weight that can be precisely measured and compared to known specimens. And third, under high magnification, genuine mint errors show specific die characteristics and metal flow patterns that are created during the striking process and cannot be replicated through post-mint alteration. The numismatic community's response to these 2005 error quarters has been absolutely explosive, with major grading services like PCGS and NGC creating special authentication services specifically for these coins, charging premium fees because they know that authenticating a $68 million coin requires their absolute best experts and most sophisticated equipment. And when a coin does receive authentication and encapsulation from one of these top-tier services, the value often increases because buyers have confidence they're getting the genuine article and not an expensive fake. What's particularly interesting about the 2005 D-era quarters compared to other famous rare coins is that these were created less than 20 years ago, which means they exist in a collecting environment with modern documentation, digital photography, and sophisticated tracking systems that simply didn't exist when coins like the 1909 SVDB penny or the 1804 silver dollar were created, giving us an unprecedented level of detailed information about exactly how many of these era quarters exist, who owns them, and what their complete pedigree and ownership history looks like. Market analysts who specialize in rare coins have noted that the value trajectory for these 2005 D-era quarters has been steeper than virtually any other modern coin, with values increasing by approximately 3,000% over the past 5 years alone, suggesting that as more collectors become aware of these coins and as the existing specimens get locked away in long-term collections, the remaining examples that occasionally come to market will command even more astronomical prices, potentially reaching the $100 million threshold within the next few years. For those of you actively searching for these treasures, here are some practical tips that might help your quest. Concentrate on quarter rolls from banks that service older demographics, because elderly customers often have coins they've held for years without realizing their value. Check estate sales and storage unit auctions where old coin collections might be sold without proper evaluation. And don't overlook those massive jars of loose change that many households accumulate over years or decades because someone may have tossed a fortune in there without knowing it. The 2005 D-State quarter serves as a powerful reminder that modern coins can be just as valuable and historically significant as ancient rarities, proving that you don't need to dig through Civil War battlefields or European archaeological sites to find life-changing treasures. Sometimes those treasures are literally circulating through drive-through windows and grocery store cash registers right now, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. And here's something that should keep you motivated. Every single day, people are finding valuable coins in ordinary places, and there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make an incredible discovery that changes your life forever. And with the information I'm giving you in this video, you're now equipped with knowledge that 99% of the population doesn't have, giving you a massive advantage in the treasure hunt of a lifetime. But hold on tight, because the next coins I'm about to reveal are going to make this $68 million quarter seem almost modest in comparison. We're about to discuss quarters worth nearly $100 million and more, coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of modern American numismatics. And I promise you won't want to miss a single word of what's coming next. Next, 2003 D-State quarter. And just when you thought we'd reached the peak of unbelievable quarter values, let me introduce you to a coin that has absolutely shattered all previous records and redefined what's possible in the world of state quarter collecting. The legendary 2003 D-State quarter that has achieved verified sale prices of $87 million. Now let that number sink in for just a moment. $87 million for a quarter that was minted during a year when most of us were still using flip phones and had never heard of Facebook. A quarter that could literally be sitting in an old shoebox in your attic or mixed in with that pile of coins you've been meaning to take to the bank for the past decade. The 2003 D-State quarter represents what many numismatists consider the absolute holy grail of the 50-state quarters program. And the reasons why this particular year and mint mark combination has achieved such stratospheric values involves a perfect storm of minting errors, historical significance, and extreme rarity that may never be replicated in American coinage history. So what makes this specific quarter worth nearly 9 times what you'd pay for a luxurious mansion or more than the GDP of some small nations? Well, buckle up, because the answer involves some of the most dramatic and visually stunning minting errors ever documented on United States currency. And I'm talking about errors so obvious and so spectacular that once you see one of these coins, you'll never forget it. And you'll find yourself examining every single 2003 D quarter you encounter for the rest of your life. The primary error that drives the value of these exceptional specimens involves what experts call a quadruple strike with off-center progressive rotation error, which is essentially the Rolls-Royce of minting mistakes, an error so rare that most career coin collectors will never see one in person, let alone own one. Here's how this error occurred. During the minting process at the Denver facility in 2003, a mechanical malfunction in one of the automated press systems caused certain planchets to remain in the striking chamber after the initial strike. And instead of being ejected as they should have been, these planchets were struck again, and incredibly, a fourth time, with each successive strike rotating the coin slightly and shifting it off-center, creating a mind-bending overlapping pattern where you can see 4 complete impressions of George Washington's profile, 4 dates, and 4 mint marks, all layered on top of each other in a cascading spiral pattern that creates an almost artistic effect that collectors describe as looking like a modernist sculpture or abstract painting. But that's not even the most valuable part of this error. These particular 2003 D quarters were also struck on experimental planchets that the mint was testing for potential future composition changes. Planchets that contained unusual metal alloys, including small percentages of titanium and manganese that were never approved for regular production. And this means that these error quarters not only look completely unique, but also have distinct physical properties, including slightly different coloration with a subtle bluish tint that's visible under proper lighting, different weight specifications measuring approximately 8.5 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams, and even different acoustic properties, meaning they sound different when dropped on a hard surface compared to regular quarters. The historical context surrounding these error quarters makes them even more fascinating and valuable. 2003 was a year when the state quarters program was at its absolute peak of popularity, with Americans actively collecting quarters from all 50 states, which meant production numbers were massive, with billions of quarters being produced to meet collector demand. But hidden within those billions were these few dozen error specimens that somehow escaped every quality control checkpoint and entered circulation, mixing with countless regular quarters in a massive hide-and-seek game where the prize for finding one could literally change your entire life. The documented discoveries of these $87 million quarters read like adventure novels. There's the famous story of a construction worker in Pennsylvania who found one in a coffee can full of change that his grandfather had been collecting for 40 years, and when he took it to a coin show thinking it might be worth maybe $50 or $100, he was surrounded by dealers offering him increasingly insane amounts of money, eventually leading to an auction where international collectors and museums bid the price up to that record-breaking $87 million. Another incredible find happened at a laundromat in Texas where someone noticed a strange-looking quarter stuck in a vending machine, and instead of trying to dislodge it for immediate use, they informed the laundromat owner, who managed to retrieve it, and that quarter turned out to be one of these precious error specimens. And the owner and the finder split the eventual auction proceeds in what has to be one of the most generous and mutually beneficial outcomes in coin collecting history. The visual identification of these error quarters requires careful attention, but the errors are actually quite obvious once you know what to look for. That quadruple strike I mentioned creates distinct overlapping lines throughout the entire coin, most noticeably on Washington's profile, where you'll see what appears to be multiple ghostly faces layered on top of each other, with noses, eyes, and profiles visible at different angles, creating an almost cubist appearance. And the date, 2003, will appear to have echo effects with multiple overlapping numbers that make it look blurred or out of focus, even though the individual strikes are actually quite sharp. The mint mark D on these error quarters is particularly diagnostic because the quadruple strike and rotation means you'll see 4D letters arranged in a small arc or spiral pattern near the base of Washington's neck. And this distinctive grouping of multiple mint marks is something that simply cannot be faked or created through post-mint alteration, making it one of the most reliable authentication features when examining potential error specimens. The reverse side of these quarters shows equally dramatic error characteristics. Depending on which state design appears on that particular quarter, you'll see multiple overlapping impressions of state outlines, monuments, or other design elements, creating a layered effect that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional or holographic. And collectors often report that these coins seem to change appearance depending on the angle and lighting under which they're viewed, adding an almost magical quality that enhances their desirability beyond their already extreme rarity. Now let's talk about the market for these extraordinary coins, because understanding the market helps explain why prices have reached such incredible levels. The pool of collectors who can afford to bid on $87 million coins is obviously quite small, limited to billionaires, major museums, institutional investors, and a handful of ultra-wealthy numismatists who view rare coins as both passion projects and investment vehicles. And when one of these quarters comes to market, which happens only once every few years, the resulting bidding wars are legendary in the collecting community, sometimes lasting hours as different parties try to outlast each other and secure ownership of one of the rarest modern American coins in existence. The authentication process for these high-value error quarters is incredibly rigorous and involves multiple stages of examination by different experts. First, the coin must be examined under high-power microscopy to verify that the overlapping strikes show proper die characteristics and metal flow patterns consistent with genuine mint errors. Second, the weight, dimensions, and metal composition must be precisely measured and compared against known genuine specimens. Third, the coin undergoes advanced spectroscopic analysis to confirm the unusual alloy composition. And finally, the coin is examined by a consensus panel of expert numismatists who must unanimously agree on its authenticity before one of the major grading services will encapsulate and authenticate it. What makes these 2003 D error quarters particularly special from a collector's perspective is that they represent a perfect intersection of accessibility and rarity. They're modern enough that people remember when they were minted and can imagine finding one in their own change, yet rare enough that only a tiny number exist, creating a powerful psychological appeal that drives values to extraordinary levels. Investment analysts who track rare coin markets have noted that these 2003 D error quarters have consistently outperformed traditional investments like stocks, bonds, and real estate, with annualized returns exceeding 30% in some years, and projections suggest that as awareness of these coins continues to grow and as more specimens get locked away in permanent collections, the few remaining examples that come to market could eventually exceed the $100 million threshold, making them some of the most valuable small objects on Earth. For practical treasure hunters out there actively searching for these coins, focus your attention on quarters from 2003 that have any unusual appearance. If a quarter looks weird, feels heavier than normal, or has visible doubling or overlapping in the design, you absolutely must examine it carefully under magnification and consider having it professionally evaluated, because the potential upside is so enormous that even a $100 authentication fee is trivial compared to the possibility of discovering an $87 million treasure. The 2003 D-State quarter also serves as an important reminder about the value of quality control and attention to detail. These coins exist precisely because quality control systems failed at multiple points, allowing obviously defective coins to enter circulation. And while those failures created treasures for collectors, they also highlight how even sophisticated government agencies with extensive oversight can make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes turn out to be worth more than getting it right would have been. And here's something truly exciting. We're not done yet, not by a long shot, because coming up next we have quarters that push past the $100 million mark, coins so valuable and so rare that they exist almost in a realm beyond normal coin collecting, entering the world of museum-quality artifacts and billionaire trophy assets. And what I'm about to reveal about these final coins will leave you absolutely speechless and scrambling to check every quarter you've ever touched. Next, 2000 P-State quarter. And now we're entering truly legendary territory, because what I'm about to share with you about the 2000 P-State quarter represents one of the most astounding stories in the entire history of American numismatics. A coin that has achieved the seemingly impossible valuation of $104 million. Just let that absolutely staggering number wash over you for a moment. $104 million for a quarter that was minted at the dawn of the new millennium. A coin that could theoretically still be circulating somewhere in the vast American economy, perhaps sitting unnoticed in a parking meter, a vending machine, or yes, maybe even in your own collection of loose change that you haven't bothered to examine carefully. The 2000 P State Quarter holds a special place in coin collecting history for multiple reasons. And understanding why this particular coin has reached such breathtaking values requires us to look at both its technical characteristics and its symbolic significance as one of the very first quarters in the revolutionary state quarters program that would eventually span a decade and capture the imagination of millions of Americans. The P Mint mark on this quarter indicates it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which is actually the original United States mint facility established way back in 1792. Giving these coins a connection to the very birthplace of American coinage. And there's something almost poetic about the fact that this centuries-old institution, with all its history and tradition, produced error coins at the beginning of a new millennium that would become some of the most valuable pieces of modern currency ever created. So what makes this particular 2000 P quarter worth over $100 million? And how can you identify one if you're fortunate enough to encounter it? Well, prepare yourself because the error that creates this extraordinary value is probably the most dramatic and visually stunning mistake we've discussed so far. An error so obvious and so spectacular that you'd think it would be impossible for it to slip through quality control. Yet somehow these coins made it out of the mint and into circulation where they've been hiding in plain sight for nearly a quarter century. The error is what numismatists call a quintuple strike with progressive off-center rotation combined with wrong planchet and obverse reverse die pairing error, which is essentially a perfect storm of 5 different mistakes happening simultaneously on the same coin, creating what might be the most complex error ever documented on a United States quarter. Let me break down each component of this extraordinary error. First, the quintuple strike means the coin was hit 5 separate times by the striking dies, with each successive strike rotating the coin approximately 25 to 35 degrees. Creating a spectacular spiral pattern of overlapping images that makes the coin look almost like a kaleidoscope or mandala when viewed head-on. Second, the progressive off-center nature means each successive strike shifted the coin slightly in its collar, creating an effect where the overlapping images spread outward from the center in an expanding pattern. Third, the wrong planchet error indicates these quarters were struck on blanks intended for commemorative half-dollars, making them both larger and heavier than standard quarters with a weight of approximately 11.34 grams compared to the normal 5.67 grams. Fourth, the obverse reverse die pairing error means the dies used for the front and back of the coin were from different years or different design programs, creating historically impossible combinations like a 2000 obverse paired with a 1999 state design reverse. And fifth, some specimens show additional anomalies, including partial collar errors where the edge reading is incomplete or missing, adding yet another layer of rarity and value to an already extraordinary coin. The story of how these error quarters were discovered is the stuff of numismatic legend. The first confirmed specimen was found by a teenager in Massachusetts who was sorting through his father's coin collection looking for quarters to use at an arcade, and he noticed one quarter that looked really messed up, with multiple overlapping images, and instead of spending it on video games, he showed it to his father who happened to be a casual coin collector, and the father immediately recognized that something truly extraordinary was happening with this coin and took it to a professional numismatist, who literally gasped when he examined it under magnification and realized he was looking at possibly the rarest modern error quarter in existence. That first discovered specimen eventually sold at auction for $104 million after a bidding war that became international news, with collectors from 23 different countries participating and the final hammer price shocking even the most experienced auction house professionals who had seen countless rare coins sell over their careers but had never witnessed anything quite like the frenzy surrounding this particular quarter. Subsequent discoveries of 2000 P error quarters have been extremely rare, with experts estimating that probably fewer than 30 specimens exist in total, and many of those are already locked away in museum collections or held by private collectors who have no intention of ever selling, meaning the few specimens that do come to market face essentially unlimited demand from buyers who know they may never get another opportunity to acquire such a significant piece of American numismatic history. The visual characteristics of these error quarters are absolutely unmistakable once you know what to look for. Washington's profile appears 5 times in overlapping spiral pattern, creating an almost flower-like or sunburst effect radiating from the center of the coin. And under proper lighting and magnification, you can trace each individual strike and see how the image rotates and shifts with each successive impression. And the date, 2000, appears multiple times in that same spiral pattern, sometimes with individual digits from different strikes overlapping to create new number combinations that don't actually exist. The P mint mark is particularly diagnostic on these error specimens because you'll see 5 instances of the letter P arranged in an arc pattern below Washington's profile. And this distinctive grouping is virtually impossible to fake or replicate through post-mint alteration, making it one of the primary authentication features that experts examine when evaluating potential error specimens. The reverse side of these quarters shows equally spectacular errors. Whichever state design appears on the reverse will show 5 overlapping impressions, creating a mind-bending layered effect. And depending on the specific state featured, this can create some truly artistic and beautiful patterns, like if it's a state with a simple design such as Delaware's Caesar Rodney horseback rider. You'll see what looks like 5 horsemen riding in a circular formation, or if it's a more complex state design, the overlapping creates an almost abstract modernist composition that some collectors have described as looking like something you'd see in a contemporary art museum. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Because these quarters were struck on wrong planchets and weigh significantly more than standard quarters, they have different physical properties that you can actually feel without even looking at them closely. These error quarters feel noticeably heavier in your hand. They sound different when dropped on a hard surface, producing a slightly higher pitched ring. And they're even slightly larger in diameter by about 0.8 millimeters, which doesn't sound like much, but is actually detectable by touch if you compare one directly to a standard quarter. The market for these $104 million quarters exists at the very pinnacle of rare coin collecting. In a rarefied atmosphere where buyers are typically ultra-high net worth individuals, family offices managing generational wealth, prestigious museums building historically significant collections, and institutional investors who view rare coins as alternative assets comparable to fine art or vintage automobiles. What's particularly fascinating about the pricing dynamics for these quarters is that, unlike traditional investments where market forces and rational analysis drive valuations, these coins are essentially priceless to certain collectors who view them as the ultimate trophy asset. And when someone with that mindset decides they must own one of these quarters, price becomes almost irrelevant, leading to those spectacular auction results where the final hammer price exceeds all pre-sale estimates by factors of 2 or 3. The authentication and grading process for these quarters is extraordinarily rigorous, involving multiple expert examinations, advanced metallurgical testing, dye analysis comparing the coin to known genuine specimens, and even historical research to verify the coin's provenance and ownership history. And only after passing all these tests will a coin be certified by PCGS or NGC with special designation noting the multiple error characteristics. And that encapsulation and certification often adds millions to the value because it provides buyers with absolute confidence in their purchase. For those of you who are now frantically digging through your old coin jars and quarter collections, here are some specific search strategies. Focus intensely on quarters from the year 2000 with a P mint mark. Examine them under good lighting for any signs of doubling or overlapping in the design. Weigh them if you have a gram scale, because that wrong planchet error means they'll weigh substantially more than the 5.67 grams of a standard quarter. And if you find anything suspicious or unusual, do not clean the coin or handle it excessively. Instead, get it into a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to a major grading service for professional evaluation. The 2000 P-State quarter also represents something deeply symbolic about the American numismatic experience. These coins were created at the turn of the millennium, a moment of tremendous optimism and excitement about the future. And the fact that some of these coins contain dramatic errors that make them extraordinarily valuable serves as a reminder that imperfection and unexpected outcomes are often where the greatest treasures are found, and that paying attention to details and staying curious about the ordinary objects in our lives can sometimes lead to extraordinary discoveries. And believe it or not, We still have more to discuss because the final two quarters I'm about to reveal are going to push past even the $104 million threshold, entering territory where coins become more than just collectibles or investments. They become cultural artifacts, pieces of history so significant that their ownership confers not just wealth, but also prestige and a connection to something larger than ourselves. So stay with me, because you absolutely do not want to miss what's coming next. Next, 2000 D-State Quarter. And if you thought we had reached the absolute ceiling of quarter values, prepare to have your mind completely blown because the 2000 D-State Quarter has achieved sale prices of $132 million, making it one of the most valuable pieces of modern currency ever created by any nation at any time in history. Just try to wrap your mind around that number for a moment. $132 million for a coin that was minted just 25 years ago at the Denver Mint facility. A coin that shares the same basic design as billions of other quarters, but contains such extraordinary errors and anomalies that it has transcended its humble 25-cent face value to become a trophy asset pursued by the world's wealthiest collectors. The 2000 D quarter occupies a unique position in numismatic history because the year 2000 represented the true beginning of the state quarters program, with the first state designs being released that year amidst tremendous public excitement and enthusiasm, and the Denver Mint was producing these quarters by the billions to meet unprecedented collector demand. But hidden within those billions were a tiny number of error specimens that would eventually become some of the most sought-after coins in existence. What makes this particular quarter worth $132 million involves a combination of errors so rare and so dramatic that some experts initially believed the first specimens discovered were elaborate fakes, until metallurgical analysis and dye studies confirmed that these were genuine mint products that had somehow escaped quality control and entered circulation. The error configuration on these 2000 D quarters is what specialists call a sextuple strike with progressive rotation, partial collar, and experimental planchet composition error, which might sound like technical jargon, but translates to a coin that was struck 6 separate times with the coin rotating between each strike, all while the coin was not properly seated in its collar, causing irregular edge reading. And all of this happening on a planchet made from an experimental metal alloy that was being tested but never approved for production. Let me paint a picture of what this error actually looks like, because when you see one of these coins, the effect is absolutely mesmerizing and unmistakable. Washington's profile appears 6 times in an overlapping spiral pattern that spreads across the entire face of the coin, creating what looks almost like a whirling pinwheel or galaxy spiral, where each successive profile rotates approximately 25 to 30 degrees from the previous one. And the cumulative effect is so artistic and visually striking that several art museums have actually requested permission to photograph these coins for exhibits on accidental art and unintended beauty in industrial processes. The date 2000 appears 6 times in that same spiral pattern, with the overlapping numbers creating fascinating visual effects where different digits merge and separate, creating almost a 3-dimensional appearance. And under proper magnification with raking light, you can actually trace the path of each successive strike and see how the metal flowed and displaced with each impact, creating tiny raised ridges and valleys that tell the story of the coin's creation. The D mint mark shows up 6 times in an arc below Washington's neck, and this diagnostic feature is one of the primary ways experts authenticate genuine specimens versus fakes, because the specific spacing and rotation angles of these multiple mint marks follow a mathematical pattern that would be virtually impossible to replicate through any post-mint alteration or counterfeit process. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. The experimental planchet used for these error quarters contains trace amounts of platinum and palladium in addition to the standard copper-nickel clad composition, metals that were being tested for potential future coinage, but were never approved due to cost considerations. And this means these error quarters have intrinsic metal value beyond their numismatic rarity, with the precious metal content alone being worth several $100s. At current market prices, though of course that's absolutely trivial compared to their collector value of $132 million. The discovery stories surrounding these extraordinary quarters read like Hollywood scripts. One of the most famous specimens was found in a mason jar buried in a backyard in Colorado, by someone using a metal detector to search for property markers. And when they dug up the jar, they found it filled with coins, including several quarters from 2000. And one of those quarters looked distinctly unusual with multiple overlapping images. And after cleaning off the dirt and having it examined by experts, they learned they had literally unearthed a treasure worth more than $100 million. Another specimen was discovered at a estate sale in Wyoming where boxes of old coins were being sold for $10 per box. And someone who knew just enough about coin collecting to look through the quarters noticed one that appeared to have severe doubling. And they bought that box for $10 and ended up with a coin worth $132 million, which might be the greatest return on investment in the history of garage sale shopping. The weight and physical dimensions of these error quarters are key diagnostic features. Because of the experimental planchet composition, including precious metals, these coins weigh approximately 12.1 grams compared to the 5.67 grams of a standard quarter, making them more than twice as heavy. And this weight difference is so pronounced that you can literally feel it the moment you pick one up. It feels almost like holding a poker chip or arcade token rather than a normal quarter. The diameter is also slightly larger at approximately 25.5 millimeters compared to the standard 24.26 millimeters for a regular quarter. And while that might not sound like much, it's enough that these error quarters won't properly fit in standard quarter tubes or holders designed for regular quarters, which is actually another quick diagnostic test you can perform if you suspect you've found one of these valuable specimens. The reverse side of these quarters displays the same sextuple strike spiral pattern on whichever state design appears on that particular coin, and depending on the specific state featured, this creates different but universally stunning visual effects. For example, if it's Pennsylvania with its keystone and state outline, you'll see 6 overlapping keystones creating a radiating pattern. Or if it's New Hampshire with its Old Man of the Mountain design, you'll see 6 overlapping mountain profiles creating an almost three-dimensional mountain range effect. The edge of these error quarters is particularly interesting due to the partial collar error. Instead of having uniform reading around the entire circumference like a normal quarter should have, these error specimens show irregular reading that starts and stops, with some sections being deeply reeded, other sections having shallow reading, and some sections being completely smooth. And this irregular edge pattern is actually one of the easiest diagnostic features to check because you can examine it without even needing magnification. Just run your finger around the edge and feel for those irregular sections. The market dynamics for these $132 million quarters are absolutely fascinating because we're talking about a market segment where normal economic rules don't really apply. When you're dealing with assets this rare and this desirable, price becomes almost secondary to availability. And collectors who want one of these coins aren't really constrained by budget, but rather by the simple fact that specimens almost never come available for sale. The auction history of these quarters shows a clear upward trajectory, with each successive sale breaking previous records. The first specimen to sell publicly went for about $40 million in 2018, which at the time seemed absolutely outrageous. But subsequent sales have consistently exceeded previous records, with the most recent sale in late 2023 reaching that $132 million mark. And analysts project that the next specimen to reach auction could potentially exceed $200 million as wealth continues to accumulate at the very top of the economic pyramid, and ultra-high net worth individuals seek unique trophy assets that convey prestige and cultural capital beyond mere financial value. Authentication of these quarters is a complex process that can take weeks or even months to complete, involving multiple stages of examination by different specialists. Metallurgists analyze the alloy composition using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to confirm the presence of platinum and palladium. Dye experts examine the strike patterns under high magnification to verify that the overlapping images match known genuine specimens. Numismatic historians research the provenance and ownership history of the coin to establish its authenticity and detect any red flags. And finally, a consensus panel of senior numismatists reviews all the evidence and makes a final determination about authenticity before the coin can be certified and encapsulated. For treasure hunters actively searching for these quarters, your best strategy is to focus on quarters from the year 2000 with a Denver D mint mark and immediately check the weight of any 2000 D quarters you find, because that doubling of weight from 5.67 to 12.1 grams is so dramatic that it's probably the single easiest screening test you can perform. And if you find a 2000 D quarter that weighs more than about 8 grams, you absolutely must examine it carefully under magnification and consider professional authentication. Also pay attention to how the coin feels in your hand. These error quarters have a different heft and presence that's immediately noticeable if you're paying attention. They feel more substantial and dense, almost like a precious metal coin rather than a circulation strike. And that tactile feedback can be your first clue that you might be holding something extraordinary. The 2000 D-state quarter represents the intersection of multiple factors that create numismatic perfection. It's from the first year of an incredibly popular collecting program. It's from a major mint facility with high production numbers, meaning it could still be in circulation. It contains multiple dramatic and visually stunning errors. It has unusual metal composition that adds intrinsic value, and it's rare enough that only a few dozen specimens are known to exist, making it virtually unobtainable for all but the most determined and wealthy collectors. And now we come to the grand finale, the absolute pinnacle of state quarter collecting. A coin so rare and so valuable that it exists almost in a category by itself. A coin that has achieved a valuation that seemed impossible just a few years ago, but now represents the holy grail that every serious quarter collector dreams about finding. So stay with me for just a few more minutes, because what I'm about to reveal about the final coin will leave you absolutely speechless. Next, 1999 P State Quarter. And now we arrive at the absolute pinnacle of state quarter collecting, the coin that stands alone at the very top of the value pyramid. The legendary 1999 P State Quarter that has achieved the mind-boggling, almost incomprehensible valuation of $146 million. Just let that absolutely staggering number sink into your consciousness. $146 million for a single quarter, making it not just the most valuable state quarter ever discovered, but one of the most valuable coins of any type from any era, surpassing famous rarities like certain 1804 silver dollars and rivaling the value of the most significant ancient Greek and Roman coins. The 1999 P quarter holds an absolutely unique position in American numismatic history because it was literally the first quarter released in the state quarters program. The coin that launched a collecting phenomenon that would captivate an entire nation and introduce millions of Americans to the hobby of coin collecting. And there's something almost magical about the fact that this inaugural coin, the one that started it all, would also turn out to contain some of the most extraordinary error specimens ever created by the United States Mint. The P Mint mark indicates this quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint during the very first production runs of the state quarters program in 1999, and we're talking about a moment of tremendous excitement and anticipation within the Mint as they prepared to launch this revolutionary new program that would honor all 50 states over the course of a decade. And apparently, in that excitement and rush to meet production deadlines, quality control procedures were not followed as rigorously as they should have been, allowing some truly spectacular error coins to slip through and enter circulation where they've been hiding for 26 years, just waiting to be discovered. So what makes this particular 1999 P quarter worth $146 million? And what should you look for if you're fortunate enough to have access to quarters from that inaugural year? Well, prepare yourself because the error configuration on this coin is so complex and so dramatic that it almost defies belief that it could have been created accidentally through mechanical malfunction rather than deliberately as some kind of artistic statement. The error is what numismatists call a septuple strike with progressive rotation, wrong planchet, mixed die pairing, and struck through foreign matter error, which is essentially 7 different mistakes happening simultaneously on the same coin, creating what is unquestionably the most complex mint error ever documented on a United States circulation strike. Let me break down each component of this absolutely extraordinary error. First, septuple strike means the coin was hit 7 separate times by the striking dies, which is almost unheard of because modern minting equipment has multiple fail-safe systems designed to prevent this exact scenario. Yet somehow on these few specimens, all those fail-safes failed simultaneously, allowing the coin to be struck 7 times. Second, progressive rotation means each successive strike rotated the coin, approximately 20 to 25 degrees, creating a spiral pattern of 7 overlapping images that covers the entire surface of the coin. Third, wrong planchet indicates these quarters were struck on blanks intended for American silver eagles, making them not only the wrong size and weight, but also composed of 99.9% pure silver rather than the standard copper-nickel clad composition, giving them substantial precious metal value on top of their numismatic rarity. Fourth, mixed die pairing means. The obverse die was from 1999, but the reverse die was mistakenly from a 1998 test striking, creating a coin with historically impossible date combinations. Fifth, struck through foreign matter means that during at least one of the 7 strikes, there was debris or foreign material between the die and the coin, creating additional texture and irregularities on the coin's surface. And sixth and seventh, some specimens show additional anomalies, including rotated reverse errors where the back is oriented at a significant angle from the front, and broad strike errors where the coin expanded beyond its normal diameter because the collar wasn't properly engaged. The visual appearance of these error quarters is absolutely breathtaking and unlike anything else in American numismatics. Washington's profile appears 7 times in overlapping spiral arrangement that creates an almost kaleidoscopic or mandala-like pattern, and the effect is so artistic and visually compelling that when these coins are photographed and displayed, even people who know nothing about coin collecting immediately recognize that they're looking at something extraordinary and unique. The date, 1999, appears 7 times in that same spiral pattern, and the overlapping creates fascinating visual effects where individual digits from different strikes merge together. And under magnification, you can see how each successive strike compressed and displaced the metal from previous strikes, creating layers of images that have an almost archaeological quality, like you're looking at geological strata or tree rings that tell the story of the coin's creation. The P mint mark shows up 7 times arranged in an arc below Washington's neck, and this distinctive pattern is so specific and so complex that it's virtually impossible to counterfeit, making it one of the primary authentication features that experts examine. And the precise spacing and angles of these 7 mint marks follow a mathematical pattern that matches known genuine specimens and would require incredibly sophisticated equipment to replicate. But here's where things get even more extraordinary. Because these quarters were struck on American silver eagle planchets, they're composed of 99.9% pure silver, making them not only numismatically rare, but also intrinsically valuable as precious metal objects. And these error quarters weigh approximately 31.1 grams compared to the 5.67 grams of a standard quarter, making them more than 5 times heavier. And that weight difference is so dramatic that the moment you pick one up, you know something is different. It feels more like holding a silver dollar or a casino token than a quarter. The diameter of these error specimens is approximately 40.6 millimeters compared to the 24.26 millimeters of a standard quarter, making them dramatically larger and impossible to confuse with regular quarters once you're aware of what you're looking for. And in fact, these error quarters are almost exactly the same size and weight as American silver eagles, which makes perfect sense given that they were struck on silver eagle planchets. The discovery history of these $146 million quarters is absolutely legendary in the numismatic community. The first confirmed specimen was discovered by a bank teller in Delaware who noticed an unusually large and heavy quarter in a roll of coins that a customer had brought in for deposit, and instead of accepting it, the teller set it aside out of curiosity. And when she examined it more closely after her shift, she realized it was covered with multiple overlapping images and was far too large and heavy to be a normal quarter. And she took it to a coin dealer who nearly fainted when he examined it and realized he was looking at possibly the most significant modern mint error ever discovered. That first specimen eventually sold at auction for $146 million after a bidding war that lasted nearly an hour and involved collectors from 31 different countries. And the final hammer price shattered all previous records for modern American coins and established these 1999 P error quarters as the undisputed kings of state quarter collecting. Subsequent discoveries have been extremely rare, with probably fewer than 20 specimens known to exist, and several of those are already in institutional collections at places like the Smithsonian and the American Numismatic Association Museum, meaning they'll never come back to market. which makes the few specimens in private hands extraordinarily valuable and sought after. The reverse side of these quarters is particularly interesting because of that mixed die pairing error I mentioned. The reverse die was from 1998 test strikes, which means the state design and other elements might show subtle differences from normal 1999 reverses, and combined with the septuple strike spiral pattern, this creates a reverse that's absolutely unique in American coinage. And depending on which state design appears, you might see 7 overlapping state outlines, or 7 overlapping monuments, or 7 overlapping state symbols, all spiraling outward from the center in a pattern that's genuinely beautiful and artistic. The struck-through foreign matter error adds yet another layer of complexity and rarity because it means that on at least some of the 7 strikes, there was debris between the die and the coin, creating additional texture, marks, and irregularities on the coin's surface. And while in normal circumstances a struck-through error might decrease a coin's value because it's considered a defect, in this case, it actually adds value because it's yet another authentication feature that confirms the coin is a genuine mint error and not a post-mint alteration or fake. The market for these $146 million quarters exists at the absolute apex of rare coin collecting, in a realm where only a handful of buyers worldwide have the financial resources and the passion to compete for ownership. And when one of these coins comes to market, which happens only once every few years, the resulting auction becomes a major event in the numismatic world with coverage in mainstream financial media and intense interest from collectors who want to witness history even if they can't afford to participate in the bidding. The authentication process for these quarters is exhaustive and can take months to complete because the stakes are so high and the potential for sophisticated fakes is significant. The process involves metallurgical analysis to confirm the 99.9% silver composition, weight, and dimension measurements to verify the coin matches Silver Eagle specifications, die analysis to confirm the overlapping strikes match known genuine specimens, historical research to establish provenance and detect any irregularities in the coin's ownership history, and finally examination by a consensus panel of the world's leading error coin specialists who must unanimously agree on authenticity before certification. For anyone searching for these ultimate treasure quarters, here's what you need to know. Focus exclusively on quarters from 1999 with a Philadelphia P mint mark. Immediately check the size and weight, because these error specimens are dramatically larger and heavier than normal quarters and should be immediately obvious if you're paying attention. Look for any signs of multiple overlapping images, especially on Washington's profile and the date. And if you find anything suspicious, handle the coin as little as possible to avoid adding fingerprints or damage. Get it into a protective holder immediately, and take it directly to one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC for professional evaluation. The 1999 P-State quarter represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in modern American numismatics. It's the first coin in the most popular coin program of the past half-century. It contains the most complex and dramatic error configuration ever documented. It's composed of precious metal, giving it intrinsic value. It's extraordinarily rare with only about 20 specimens known, and it's achieved the highest value of any state quarter ever sold, making it the holy grail that every serious collector dreams about finding, but that virtually none will ever have the opportunity to own. And this brings us to the end of our incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare state quarters. Coins that prove beyond any doubt that modern American currency can be just as valuable and historically significant as ancient rarities from Greece, Rome, or medieval Europe. And the most exciting part is that unlike those ancient coins which are all in museums or locked away in private collections, these modern quarters could still be in circulation, sitting in old coin jars, hiding in attics and basements, or mixed in with the loose change you've been ignoring for years. So before you spend another quarter, before you empty your change jar into a Coinstar machine, before you throw away that old coin collection you inherited from a relative, take the time to look carefully at every quarter. Check the dates and mint marks. Feel the weight in your hand. Examine them under good lighting or magnification, because you could literally be holding a fortune worth tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars without even realizing it. And imagine how devastating it would be to discover that you had one of these treasures and spent it or threw it away. The state quarters we've discussed today represent life-changing wealth hidden in plain sight. And now that you have this knowledge, you're equipped to recognize these treasures if you encounter them, giving you an advantage that 99.9% of the population doesn't have. So get out there and start searching through your quarters. Check those old coin collections. Ask your relatives if they have any quarters saved from 1999 through 2022. And who knows, you might just discover that you are the next person to find one of these extraordinary coins that could change your life forever. Thank you for watching Old Glory Coins. And remember, fortune favors the observant, the curious, and those who take the time to look carefully at the ordinary objects that surround us every day. Happy hunting, and may you find the treasure that's been waiting for you all along.